And just a few quick announcements, inshallah, before we start our program. Today's majlis is sponsored by Brother Muzammil and Dr. Lubna Hasnan, Brother Ahmed and Sister Fatma Mirza, Brother Zahir, and Sister Shaheen Babu. The Tabarruk is sponsored by Brother Ahmed and Fatma Mirza, Brother Muzammil and Dr. Lubna Hasnan, Brother Akbar and Sister Urdu. Please recite Surah Fatiha for all Marhumin and Mominat. For those Marhumin and Mominat, there's nobody to recite Fatiha for. Marhumin and Mominat, and the Marhumin and Mominat that are on the wall of Zahra, and inshallah the following sponsors Marhumin and Mominat. Sayyid Hassan, Sayyid Roshan Hassan, Mahmoud Ali Mirza, Haidar Begum Mirza, Sayyid Murtaza Hussain, Sayyid Rashid Hussain, Sayyid Fakir Ali, Rana Iftikhar Khan, Rana Salim, Rana Taj Mahmud Khan, Ruqayya Begum, Sabiha Kumar Ali, Akbar Ali Babul, Shabir Ali Hemyani, Narjis Fazil, Marhumin of Babul and Hemyani families, Marhumin of families of Brother Muzammil and Dr. Lubna Hasnan, Marhumin of families of Akbar and Aruj Kazmi, Jumla Marhumin and Mominat. Surah Fatiha. Inshallah, we'll begin the program with the Tilawat al-Quran. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إذا جاء نصر الله والفتح ورأيت الناس يدخلون في دين الله أفواجا فسبح بحمد ربك واستغفر إنه كان توابا. صدق الله العلي العظيم. صلوات الله صلى على محمد وعلى محمد. Inshallah, I'll recite short poetry in Urdu. So, Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں نجات لے جاؤ. حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں نجات لے جاؤ. کچھ آنسوؤں کے عوض کائنات لے جاؤ. حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں نجات لے جاؤ. یہ کربلا ہے یہ معجز نما کی بستی ہے. یہ کربلا ہے یہ معجز نما کی بستی ہے. کفن میں اس کے لپیٹو حیات لے جاؤ. حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں، نجات لے جاؤ. کہیں گے ماتمی حلقوں سے لوگ محشر میں، کہیں گے ماتمی حلقوں سے لوگ محشر میں، ہمیں حسین کی جنت میں ساتھ لے جاؤ. نہیں کروں گا لحد میں انتظار سحر، نہیں کروں گا لحد میں انتظار سحر. فرشتوں کے بو بلارا تو رات لے جاؤ. حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں، نجات لے جاؤ. قسم حسین کی پرسے میں کم ہی لگتا ہے، قسم حسین کی پرسے میں کم ہی لگتا ہے. بلند جتنا بھی ماتم میں ہاتھ لے جاؤ. کہا یہ خضر سے عباس نے یہاں کر، کہا یہ خضر سے عباس نے یہاں کر، ہماری مشک سے آبے حیات لے جاؤ. کہیں گی فاطمہ وقت ظہور مہدی سے، کہیں گی فاطمہ وقت ظہور مہدی سے، لڑائی کے لیے غازی کو ساتھ لے جاؤ. حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں، نجات لے جاؤ. کچھ آنسوؤں کے وزن کائنات لے جاؤ. حسین بانٹ رہے ہیں، نجات لے جاؤ. پر محمد وآل محمد صلوات. Just a few quick announcements while we wait for Maulana, inshallah. Inshallah, Friday will be the 10th of Muharram, so we will have a day program, inshallah, and then Shami Ghariba Majlis at night. And also, inshallah, on August 12th, we will have the second annual ICZ Youth Cemetery Majlis, inshallah, starting at 4 p.m. If you guys want to recite, please sign up now. There are limited spots. And if you sign up late, we can't guarantee a spot to recite. Inshallah, for the Urdu Majalis, we have Maulana Mirza Zaheen Najafi until Soyem, inshallah. And we have Sheikh Reza Hemyani for the English programs until Soyem, inshallah. And with that, I would like to invite Sheikh Reza Hemyani to please bless us with a speech. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salam.
الفاتحة. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الرحمن الرحيم مالك يوم الدين إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. اللهم صل على محمد وآله. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وبه نستعين إنه خير ناصر ومعين. ثم الصلاة والسلام والتحية والإكرام على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين سيما بقية الله في الأراضين وحجته على الخلق أجمعين. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله وعلى الأرواح التي حلت بفنائك. عليك مني سلام الله أبدا ما بقيت وبقي الليل والنهار ولا جعله الله آخر العهد مني لزيارتكم. السلام على الحسين وعلى علي بن الحسين وعلى أولاد الحسين وعلى أصحاب الحسين. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. أما بعد، فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. يا أيتها النفس المطمئنة ارجعي إلى ربك راضية مرضية فادخلي في عبادي وادخلي جنتي. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد. I can ask the brothers to maybe move to the center a little bit. If you can. صلوا على محمد وعلى محمد. Dear brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. In these past few nights, we've been talking about the verses of Surah Al-Fajr, and we arrived at verse number 21. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. كلا إذا دكت الأرض دكا دكا وجاء ربك والملك صفا صفا وجيء يومئذ بجهنم يومئذ يتذكر الإنسان وأنى له الذكرى. Allah, He gives us an image of what will come on the day of judgment. It is an image that Allah keeps referring to throughout the Quran. what we should expect on the Judgment Day. And one of those images is in this verse, starting from ayah number 21. Allah says that on that day, Allah will pound the earth and He will continue to pound it and He will ground it. And then Allah will come along with the angels in rows and rows. And on that day, Allah will bring, it is said, the hellfire close to man, to human beings. The hellfire is brought close to them. And it is on that day that man and human beings will remember and they will take admonition. But that admonition and that memory is not going to benefit them at all. It is, in other words, too late. Allah, throughout the Quran, as I mentioned, He gives us different images and different descriptions of the Day of Judgment. And in all of these descriptions, Allah describes for us a scene in which our world is turned upside down. All of the things that we are familiar with are taken away. In some verses of the Quran, Allah mentions that He will in fact lift the veils from our eyes. فَكَشَفْنَا عَنْكَ غِطَاءَكَ فَبَصَرُكَ الْيَوْمَ حَدِيدٌ. We will remove the veils that have been covering your eyes, that have been preventing you from seeing the world as it is. And on that day, your sight and your vision will be pure and it will be correct. It will see the world, it will see yourselves, and it will see your actions as they are. In this world, we are blinded. In other words, Allah says that we have veils over our eyes and we can't see ourselves as we truly are. Sometimes we think that, as these verses of Surah Al-Fajr have said, sometimes Allah gives me blessings and I think now that Allah has honored me. So I think that my actions are good and Allah is endorsing who I am and my actions. I specifically emphasize this because Allah is not just looking at our actions, He is looking at who we have become. Imagine your soul as a garden, correct? And with every garden, you are planting certain seeds and you are watering that soil. And then over time, some things begin to emerge, whether it's weeds or it's flowers or it's fruits. And over time, through our own actions, our soul transforms and it becomes a person who is patient. We become people who are God-fearing. Or on the other hand, we become people who are impatient and we become people who are superficial and materialistic. We only care about the comfort of our life. And so on the Day of Judgment, Allah says that all of these things, all of these veils will be removed. And on that day, Allah says, وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا. On that day, and this is one of the other attributes and aspects of the Day of Judgment, those things that we take pride in this world, all of those things will be taken away. And the most important characteristic that we see in ourselves in this world is our ability to have our way, to fulfill my wants and my needs. I get money so that I can go and buy whatever I want. I have status so I can tell other people to do as I please. And so in other words, I see my life and the thing that I value the most in terms of my will and my ability to further that will, to get what I want. Correct? But again, the Day of Judgment is different. All of those things that we thought we were in control of on the Day of Judgment, Allah says, it is in the hands of God. وَجَاءَ رَبُّكَ وَالْمَلَكُ صَفًّا صَفًّا. In another verse of the Quran, Allah says, وَالْأَمْرُ يَوْمَئِذٍ لِلَّهِ. What does it mean for Allah to come on the Day of Judgment? For Him to come close to human beings and the angels to be in rows, row upon row. So think about that image. God coming close and the angels coming in these rows. Allah is, in this other verse of the Quran, He is saying that the command of Allah, the affair of all of His creation, when Allah pulls back that veil, we realize that all of those things are in the hands of God. And on the Day of Judgment, He takes away our ability to present and manifest our will. Just as we grow up, just as we are brought into this world and we are taken away from this world, our very creation is outside of our will. And so Allah, on the Day of Judgment, He lifts those veils and He shows us that, in fact, we are under the command of God. وَجِيءَ يَوْمَئِذٍ بِجَهَنَّمٍ. Another veil is lifted. On the Day of Judgment, Allah brings the hellfire close, the Jahannam. It says that Jahannam is brought close. Now, in other verses of the Quran, Allah describes this, and our Mufassirun, they point to these other verses. For example, in Surah An-Nazi'at, Allah says, وَبُرِّزَتِ الْجَحِيمُ لِمَنْ يَرَى. Allah, on the Day of Judgment, it's not as though the hellfire or the heaven is some far off distance that now we have to be brought close to that distance. Now we have to, there's this place called Jahannam or this place called heaven, and now we have to be taken, maybe with some sort of transportation, we have to be taken to that place. In other verses of the Quran, Allah says that, in fact, on the Day of Judgment, Jahannam and the hellfire is just simply going to be presented to humankind. Almost as though that there was that veil that I was mentioning earlier. That veil on Jahannam is lifted. All of those actions that we were partaking in our lives, those actions are taking us towards Jahannam as we speak. We're building those palaces, those blessings in heaven, or we are kindling those fires with our actions. And so don't think about it as some far off place. Allah simply on the Day of Judgment is going to reveal to us the results of our actions in terms of a place called heaven and a place called hell. That is one understanding of these verses. And then Allah continues, يَوْمَئِذٍ يَتَذَكَّرُ الْإِنسَانُ وَأَنَّى لَهُ الذِّكْرَى. On that day, Allah, He tells us that on that day, human beings are going to remember and they're going to take an admonition. But what is it going to avail them now, after all has been said and done? You have lived your entire life in distraction, and I have been sort of thinking about this world in this superficial way. Now that the Day of Judgment has come, Allah says it is too late. Now is not the day of action, it is the day of reaping the benefits or the loss of our action. And so the Day of Judgment, Allah says, human beings will remember, but then that memory and that admonition is not going to benefit them because they can't go back anymore. Allah, in another verse of the Quran, in Surah Al-Ankabut, He says that this world, لَهْوٌ وَلَعِبٌ وَإِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةِ إِنَّ الدَّارَ الْآخِرَةَ هِيَ الْحَيَوَانِ. This world is simply a distraction. It is simply a play and a distraction. But in fact, it is that final world, the hereafter, which is truly alive, which is truly the life that we are leading. لو كانوا يعلمون. If only they knew. And so if we think about the vision that Allah is giving us about the Day of Judgment, again, this vision is on top of and is exactly equal to the life that we are living. If only we knew. If only those veils were lifted from us. Now, Allah, He tells us, He gives us these visions in terms of the words of the Quran and the teachings of the Quran. But sometimes Allah explains to us what will happen when this huge calamity occurs. Because in the end of the day, as I mentioned, كَلَّا إِذَا دُكَّتِ الْأَرْضُ دَكًّا دَكًّا, when the world will be pounded and it will be ground, and all of the superficial stuff that we are distracted by in this world, they are going to be obliterated. So Allah is going to lift those veils. Those veils are lifted through this tumultuous and calamitous event. In other verses of the Quran, Allah describes for us how calamitous and how much of a crisis the Day of Judgment is going to bring for us. In other words, He says, through crisis and through calamity, I will lift those veils. One of the most difficult, I mentioned there are different illustrations, different descriptions that God gives about the Day of Judgment. One of the most sort of painful and yet at the same time most illustrative descriptions that God gives is in the beginning of Surah Al-Hajj. Allah describes for us an image. He says, on that day, human beings, you will see, when we think about a person who has the most love for another person, we think about a mother towards her child. So in Surah Al-Hajj, Allah says that you will see that on that day, a great earthquake will occur, shaking up your expectations and shaking up what you are accustomed to. And then on that day, mothers who are feeding their children, they will forget about those very children they are feeding. Animals and humans who are pregnant, the babies, the children that they are pregnant with, the infants that they're pregnant with, they will come forth from them because of imagine, right, how much stress and how much distress people are in, that they're forgetting about their own kids. And then you will see human beings almost as though they are drunk. Their minds have left them. Their reason has left them. But of course they are not. So think about that image. Right? People who have lost their wits, they have lost their senses on that day because of this enormous and calamitous event. These are verses of the Quran. Allah describes for us what it means for the Day of Judgment to come. But Allah as well, He tells us in the Quran that there are verses of the book of Allah, the verses that I reveal to you in this book. But then there are also verses and ayats that I reveal in your own life. So pay attention. Take heed. There are moments in my life where Allah presents me with a crisis and a calamity. What is the benefit? What is the blessing that comes from that calamity? As I mentioned, Allah presents these verses of the Quran as a way for me to take a lesson from them. And Allah as well presents a crisis in my life so that I can pay heed and take lessons from those crises. And so at some point in my life, I will be faced with a moment of difficulty. If I have prepared myself for those moments, then maybe with the grace of God, I can survive. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. let's take a moment to think about, what does crisis do for us? One of the things that crisis does is that it shakes up our habits. Sometimes we get into certain habits, we think about the world in a particular way, and we get accustomed to it. We get used to it almost, and we have these reactions and interactions with the world in an almost automatic way. So sometimes, for example, if I am used to cheating, if I'm used to taking shortcuts, I can paper over those shortcuts. I can paper over that cheating when times are good. Correct? So for example, in the last year or so, there was that great earthquake in the countries of Turkey and Syria. One of the reasons why there was so much death and destruction in those countries, as the news reports came in, was because that a lot of these buildings that were constructed, they were constructed without proper engineering, without proper tools, without the proper equipment and the proper supplies. On the surface, when times are good, there's no earthquake, huge buildings, you can house a lot of people, everything is good. Your economy is running well, all is good. But when an earthquake comes, you see that those corners that you have cut, the money that you have spent, and you haven't taken the proper steps, all of that comes crumbling down. That's one of the things that crisis allows us to do. It stops us from taking those corners, cutting those corners. It stops us from getting and continuing those habits that at one point in time we're going to have to respond to. Another benefit of crisis is that it allows us to reevaluate our situation. It allows us to understand that sometimes we can analyze a situation in a very superficial way. We need houses, and so we should build buildings as quickly as possible so that we can house these people, whether we want to cut corners or not. But ultimately, what we need is proper housing. We need a society that lives up to the proper standards that it sets for itself. And so, if a crisis comes, it allows us to now see the problems as not just in that very superficial way. When the buildings come crumbling down, we realize that there is a more systematic and systemic problem in our society. And so we can address those problems. Again, when times are good, we don't have that opportunity. We can paper things over. When times are bad, then we are forced to face those problems. Let me give you one example. If I have a good relationship with the people around me, with my family, with my friends, during times that are good and times that are bad, I can deal with them, I can be patient towards them, and so on and so forth. But if I haven't worked on myself, if I haven't made myself and habituated myself to becoming a patient person, or if I allow those relationships to fall by the wayside, when times are good, when everyone is happy, they're comfortable, then everybody can get along. They can deal with one another. But say, for example, and this is one thing that I think it's a common thing, they say if you want to really know your relationship with a person, or if you want to be able to understand where you stand with that person, go on a trip with them. Go on a camping trip, for example. See how you interact with that person when times are difficult. Can you, in other words, when the rain is pouring, when you can't light a proper fire, when your tent, for example, has a leak, when things are difficult, in other words, can you be patient in that moment? I say this from personal experience, right? For those who have been camping, right? It's a difficult time. Sometimes when it's raining and you don't have any shelter, it's difficult to be able to deal with other people who might disagree with you. Someone might say that, no, this is where we should put the shelter. They say we should go and collect firewood. I tell you, you tell me, right? Nobody wants to get wet. So when times are difficult, we realize where our relationships stand. Am I willing to stay patient when, for example, my son doesn't abide by what I say? Am I willing to stay patient when my father, for example, tells me to do something and I just simply don't want to do it, right? Or when we disagree and we, God forbid, have a fight. When I have a debate or a dispute with my wife, what are the mechanisms and what are the red lines that I have set for myself? When a dispute comes, do I just go and say whatever I want and do whatever I want with my spouse? Or have I set certain red lines before that moment comes? Do I still uphold that respect for the person opposite me? Let me give you a very quick other example. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And I don't know if I should turn this way because everybody's on this side or turn this way. So if I can have everybody come to the center so we can allow people to come in as well. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Jazakallah. Thank you. Let me give you a very quick other example because it is relevant both it's in the news currently and also because we are talking about how these verses of the Quran are a reflection of the journey of Imam Hussein. Recently, if we have been paying attention to the news, we hear that in the state of Israel, there are these protests for months and months, 20, 30 months or so. There have been protests in the state of Israel. For years, we had heard that the state of Israel was a democratic state, a state which had elections, it has a president, a prime minister, it has a cabinet, it has a parliament, and laws are passed, and there's a judiciary, and so on and so forth. For years, we heard that the state of Israel was the beacon of democracy in the Middle East. Correct? And then, all of a sudden, we hear that there are these huge protests. This beacon of democracy is now faltering. There are these protests. They're claiming that the very democratic institutions, the separation of the powers in the government, are being endangered. The judiciary is going to be made it's going to be held accountable by the legislature and by the executive branch. And so there are laws that are being passed, which is going to basically take away the power of the Supreme Court of the state. For years, we could paper over the fact that there was an entire population that was not really given any sort of democratic part of the country. Millions of people were not a part of the state, and yet they were occupied by the state. Both outside in the occupied territories and as well, if you actually look in the history of Israel, the Arabs that live in the state are as well considered second-class citizens. And this is actually a part of the law. So if you look in the history of the country, there are actually laws that prohibit Arab citizens from becoming full-fledged members of the state. For years, you can paper over the fact that this country is democratic. There are certain democratic institutions. But then when the time comes and the right-wing parties of that state now come and take over, the crisis happens, in other words. Now we have to reconsider. is it really a democratic state anymore? Or is this idea and this sort of image of democracy being shaken to its core? These same people who have disenfranchised the Palestinians, people who are occupied, these same people are in charge and responsible for now passing these laws. Again, crisis is an opportunity. It is difficult, but at the same time, it's an opportunity for us to now reconsider what are those values and as well those problems that our society is created based upon. As I mentioned, this is a very good metaphor for what was occurring during the time of Imam Hussein. Before we get to that, crisis is also an opportunity for us to realize that a lot of the things that are surrounding us, a lot of the problems that we face in our lives ultimately are beyond our control. When an earthquake happens, when other parties in our country, and by the way, this is not something just against the states of Israel, even in our own country, we have the same problems. A Republican president comes into power, and then you have all of a sudden, this administration is the worst administration that America has ever seen. The democratic institutions of this country are being questioned. But what is it that led us to that point? Why was that person elected in the first place? That is what crisis allows us to consider. Don't think about it in a superficial way, where when you take that person out of power, then everything is solved. Crisis allows us first to shake up our habits, those bad and immoral habits that we have become accustomed to. It allows us to account for the true problems in our society and in my own life. What are the habits that I have placed in my own life? And as well, crisis allows me to now realize that there are parts of my life, major parts of my life, that are beyond my control. And that is where dua comes into play. There's a beautiful hadith of Amir al-Mu'mineen, Imam Ali alayhi salam, where the Imam says, Ad-du'a tursul mu'min. Dua and praying to God is the shield and the protection of the believer. The more you pray, the more you go and knock on the door of God, the more likely that door is going to be opened for you. A shield, when you're in the battle, you never put down your shield. And we are all in the battle of our lives. Ultimately, we're going to face the result of that battle when we die. And so we are constantly in this battle, whether we realize it or not. That shield that we have in the face of those struggles is our dua. Sometimes we allow ourselves to be distracted. But then we have another hadith of our sixth Imam, Imam Ja'far as-Sadiq alayhi salam, where he says, Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Where he says that do dua for great things in your life and for small things. For major needs that you have and even for the most minor of things. I, for example, I'm going to the grocery store and I, have enough money in my account. I don't have any concern that my credit card is going to be rejected. But I still do dua. That God forbid, the credit card machine doesn't stop working and I don't become embarrassed because my card doesn't work. I do dua that, oh Allah, allow my car to start so that I can go to work. I do dua that, oh Allah, allow me the opportunity to come to the masjid. Oh Allah, give me the opportunity to go and say salam to my father or my mother or my brother or my sister. All of these, the great things and the small things, these all require dua. every single part of my life. The Imam says, لأن صاحب الكبائر or kibar هو صاحب الصغار. The person and the being who is in charge of the great things that you need in your life, he is also the one who is in charge of the small things in your life. Now the Imam isn't just simply telling us, if you go to the grocery store, do dua. Oh Allah, allow my credit card to work. Or oh Allah, allow my car to work. The idea here is, first of all, I do dua because I realize that I don't have anything in my own life. Anything that I have, any blessing that I have, any life that I have, any breath that I take in and every breath that comes out, that is all with the grace of God. Dua allows me to remember that. When I do dua, when I turn to God, I can't but remember the fact that Allah is giving me that blessing for every breath that comes in and every breath that leaves my body. But the dua also reminds me that my life is never stagnant. My relationship with God is always in a process. It's always needs to be improved. And so I do dua, oh Allah, give me patience when I'm on that camping trip. Oh Allah, give me patience when I'm dealing with my father or my mother. Oh Allah, give me that patience when I'm dealing with my brothers and sisters in Iman. Because I realize that I can always improve. My relationship with my friends and my family can always become better. My relationship with God can always improve. So I never become stagnant. I never become steady and in a place of not moving towards something. That is the benefit of dua. Now, the question that I posed last night, the question that I think is a relevant one in particular for these days, is what was the reason why Imam Hussein rose up and refused to give bay'ah to Yazid in the 60th year after the Hijrah? What was the reason why Imam Hussein refused to give bay'ah to a person like Yazid? The answer to this question, we can look in this idea of crisis. The Muslims, first and foremost, they realized that Imam Hussein and the opposite side, Yazid, was a person, and there was this kind of back and forth, correct? On one side, you have a person like Imam Hussein. On another side, you have a person like Yazid. Sometimes, the Muslims, as we mentioned in the past few nights, they had forgotten a lot of those problems that were seeping into the Ummah. Last night I gave the example of how the Muslims were dealing with the Quran now versus how they dealt with the Quran when the Prophet first revealed it. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Over time, the way they looked at the Quran changed. The way that they looked at, for example, the Khilafat changed. The way they looked at each other as Muslims, as brothers and sisters in Iman, that was also changing. Now they're looking at each other in terms of tribes and in terms of different nations. All of these changes are occurring. And the Muslims are not realizing that these changes are actually changing the priorities that their entire ummah was based on. And so they were becoming blinded, in other words, to the reality of themselves and the teachings of Islam. And so as I mentioned last night, they stopped actually paying attention to the Quran itself. But then ultimately, the 60th year after Hijrah, one of the things Imam Hussein realized that this opportunity after the death of Muawiyah presents itself, where the Muslims, On the one hand, they realize that a person like Muawiyah, tyrant, person who kills whoever opposes him, he does with whatever he wants with the money of the Muslims, all of these things. But yet he has this veneer of being a proper Muslim. And so people are still willing to call him Amirul Mu'mineen. But then when it comes to the person like Yazid, crisis. Yazid, a person who does not even put up the front that I am a proper Muslim. He drinks in public. He commits violence in public. He gives money to whoever he wants in public. He doesn't even put up a facade. So that is why when Muawiyah has passed away, Imam Hassan had created this treaty with a person like Muawiyah because out of necessity. Imam Hussein, for 10 years, actually upholds that same treaty. And so when people ask, why did Imam Hassan make a pact with Muawiyah and Imam Hussein did not? Well, actually, Imam Hussein as well continued that pact with Muawiyah. He did not break the pact of Imam Hassan. He continued it. But then the pact ends with Yazid. Muawiyah, one of the conditions of that pact was that Muawiyah cannot appoint anyone after he is gone. This is not an inheritance or a kingship that is going to be passed down from father to son. And so when we are asked, for example, why did Imam Hussein rise up against the Khalifa of his time? Well, actually, Yazid was not properly a Khalifa. The Muslims themselves as well recognize this. And so that is why Muawiyah, he goes and he tries to get bay'ah for his son. Years before this actually happened. Years before Muawiyah passes away. And the Muslims, the elite of the Muslims, the head of the Muslims, people like Abdullah ibn Zubair, Abdullah ibn Umar, and Imam Hussein himself, who was considered the only contender to the Khilafat, they refuse. So when we're asked, for example, why did Imam Hussein rise up against the Khalifa of his time? He was not actually rising up because Yazid did not have any legitimacy according to the standards of the Muslims. He should not have been the Khalifa. And he, in fact, was not. That is why Yazid, when his father passes away, when Muawiyah dies, he sends that letter to his governor in the city of Medina, Al-Walid ibn Utbah. And this letter that he sends is a very harsh letter. He says, don't allow Abdullah ibn Zubair and Hussein ibn Ali to leave your presence without getting that bay'ah from them. This is the implication of this letter is quite harsh. If they leave your presence, then have off with their head. So the journey of Imam Hussein, the danger that Imam Hussein faced, started in the city of Medina. What is the response of Imam Hussein? Mithli la yuba'u mithla. I have legitimacy. If I were to stand up and become the next Khalifa, the Muslims would accept me. But a person like Yazid does not have legitimacy in the eyes of the Muslims. And he will never have legitimacy unless he gets it through violence. So one of the reasons why Imam Hussein rises up is because ultimately he was telling the Muslims, don't sell yourselves short. A person like Yazid should not become the leader of the Muslims because ultimately he is not based. His leadership is not based on that legitimacy that you all have accepted. That is one reason. Another reason we can talk about after a loud salawat. Imam Hussein says, and again, thinking about opportunity through crisis. In the city of Medina, Imam Hussein is presented with this threat And Marwan, the vizier of the governor, he says, if you let Hussein leave your sight, then you are never going to be able to get that bay'ah that you have been commanded, you have been demanded. And so don't allow him to leave your sight. If he doesn't give you that bay'ah, then have off with his head. Na'udhu billah. So the city of Medina was not a safe city for for Imam Hussein. He leaves the city of Medina. He travels to the city of Mecca. It is in the city of Mecca that slowly these letters start pouring into and calling Imam Hussein to come towards the city of Kufa. So Imam Hussein, he sees this opportunity, one after another. It is said that thousands upon thousands of letters are coming towards Imam Hussein. Some reports say that 18,000 letters come to the Imam. Other reports say 100,000. Think about what that means. People are pledging allegiance to Imam Hussein 18,000 fold. It's not just 1, 200, 200 people. Almost as though the entire city is rising up. So Imam Hussein takes this opportunity, just like his father Amirul Mu'mineen, alayhi salam. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. When Amirul Mu'mineen, he is presented with the Khilafat, he describes it himself. He says that people were coming towards me and they were falling over each other, and I was concerned that Imam Hassan and Imam Hussein were going to be trampled under the feet of people, the people of Medina. And so I had no recourse but to accept that Khilafah. Imam Hussein, his situation is the same. The people of Kufa are calling Imam Hussein. They're saying, come towards us. Imam Hussein knew who these people were. But he says that I am sending out my delegate, my representative, so that he can go and confirm what these people are saying. And so when Muslim ibn Aqil goes to the city of Kufa, he confirms and he sends the letter back. He says, yes, they have given me bay'ah, and through me they have given you bay'ah. At that juncture, at that point, Imam Hussein has no recourse but to accept their call, despite the fact that Imam Hussein knew who these people were. And so when people come up to Imam Hussein, like his Abdullah ibn Abbas, his family member, or other people who were caring about Imam Hussein, Abdullah ibn Umar, other people who were, say, companions or people who were righteous and pious that were surrounding the Imam, when they tell him that these people of Kufa, they're not going to live up to this. He says, look at how many letters they have sent me. How can I refuse all of these people? And this brings me to the third. When people are pessimistic, everyone around the Imam was saying that these people of Kufa, they're going to leave your side. We can see it, and we know their history. They're going to leave your side just as they left the side of your father and your brother Imam Hassan. When everyone else in the world is pessimistic, a true believer, person who has taqwa, like a person like Imam Hussein, he is optimistic. He sees his responsibility. He has to command amr bi ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar. He sees the opportunity and he doesn't care anymore, because ultimately his courage and his bravery and his strength comes from Allah. I have a responsibility to uphold and respect my parents. That is my responsibility. To not cheat, not cut corners. I abide by that responsibility regardless of whether it's easy or it's hard. Regardless of whether my parents reciprocate that respect or not. Because that status is important. And so Imam Hussein, he sees his responsibility and he says that regardless of whether the people abide by what they have promised or not, my responsibility is to uphold Amr bil Ma'ruf wa Nahy anil Munkar. And this brings me to the fourth reason. And that is Imam Hussein saw his mission as a continuation of the mission of the Anbiya. Imam Hussein, he says that when people come and try to pull him down, they try to avert the impending disaster, the crisis that is going to befall the Muslims. They try to divert him from going towards the city of Kufa. They say these people are going to leave your side. He says, one of the beautiful phrases of Imam Hussein, he says that I heard from my grandfather Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa alayhi. Amarani bi amrin wa ana qadin bih or wa ana qadin fi. My grandfather has commanded me towards something, and I am not going to go against that command. He has told me, in other words, that I am going to be forced to either give allegiance and either forget about those principles that he had set, or I am going to sacrifice my own life to uphold those principles. And I am not going to let anything stand in my way, regardless of whether I have to sacrifice myself or anything else. This is the practice of the Anbiya. And so time and time again, when Imam Hussein leaves, for example, the city of Medina, he recounts the words of Nabi Musa. When he leaves the Medina, when he leaves the city of Egypt, the country of Egypt, Nabi Musa, he says, I am leaving this city khaifan yataraqab. Allah declares it in the Quran. He leaves this city while he is in a state of fear. And then he says, Oh my Lord, protect me from these unjust and oppressive people. Imam Hussein says this ayah of the Quran. In other words, the Imam is saying that my mission is in line with the mission of the Anbiya. And the Anbiya, they sacrificed themselves and they were killed in that process. And so he saw his ultimate end in terms of that ultimate sacrifice. But as I mentioned, the muttaqeen, that nafs al-mutma'inna, this courage, this bravery, it seeps from that person, Imam Hussein. When the people who are surrounding him, they see that courage and that bravery, they as well become optimistic. They as well take hope and aspiration from that person. And so that is why we see that the companions of Imam Hussein were just as brave. Yes, there were people who left the side of Imam Hussein. But then there were people like Abbas ibn Amir al-Mu'mineen, who stood with and by Imam Hussein until the very end. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Sallallahu alayka ya ibn Rasulillah. Sallallahu alayka ya ibn Amir al-Mu'mineen wa ibn Sayyid al-Wasiyyin. صلى الله عليك يا ابن فاطمة سيدة نساء العالمين يا ليتنا كنا معكم فنفوز معكم فوزا عظيما. Let us turn our attention towards Karbala. It is said that when Lady Fatima al-Zahra, she passed away, Imam Ali, he asked his brother Aqil to find him a spouse who will bear him a child, a son, who will protect Hussein when he has to take that journey towards Karbala. After all, the Prophet himself and Amir al-Mu'mineen, they were told by Allah that this journey of Hussein will come once upon a time. And the ummah of Rasulullah will be the culprits in this tragedy and in this crisis. And so Imam Ali, he wanted to prepare Hussein, and he wanted to create soldiers for Hussein, protectors for Hussein. It is said that Aqil found a person by the name of Fatima. And it is said that this lady was a very courageous lady herself from a courageous tribe. And it is said that this lady, who later became known as al-Banin, gave birth to a person like Abbas. And from the earliest moments of his life, it is said that Imam Ali taught Abbas that there is a day that will come, Ya Abbas, that you will be called upon to defend Hussein. And so don't leave his side. There's a time that will come that, oh Abbas, that maybe you will be presented with water, Abbas. But you dare not drink water when you see your brother is thirsty. It is said that Abbas was trained and he was brought up to defend Hussein. He was trained by Amir al-Mu'mineen himself. And so it is said that on the night before the day of Ashura, Zuhair, this great man of battle and of war, he looked towards Abbas and he said, it is reported that he said, Abbas, tomorrow there's going to be a fight. He was trying to prepare Abbas. He said, tomorrow there is going to be a fight. Don't you leave the side of Hussein. And Abbas turns to Zuhair and he says, I will show you something that you have never seen. I will defend my brother and I will never leave his side until there is a last drop of blood in my body. I will show you a fight that no one has ever seen before. It is said that on the day of Ashura, one after another, the soldiers and the companions of Imam Hussein went out to fight for their Imam, to defend their Imam. And one after another, the Imam would bring their bodies back to the tent until those final moments of that day. It is said that Imam Hussein and Abbas were left. There was no one left other than these two. And Abbas is trying to figure out one way or another to ask his brother, to ask Imam Hussein, Ya Imam, do I have permission to go out and fight for you? Abbas asks, and Imam Hussein says, Oh my Abbas, you are the standard bearer of my army. You are the flag bearer of my army. Oh Abbas, have you ever seen an army without a flag bearer? What would I do without you, oh Abbas? It is said that Abbas looks to his left and he looks to his right and he says, Ya Hussein, Ya Aba Abdullah, what army do you speak of? Everyone has gone and everyone has been killed. It is you and me that are left. And so Imam Hussein, he gives him permission. But it is said that the wails and the crying of the children, they flare up and they hear the cries of the children. Wa atasha, and the thirst and the cries of the children. It is said that Imam Hussein says to Abbas, before you go out and you fight these enemy soldiers, oh Abbas, would you not just bring some water for them to drink? Abbas knows his mission, and he has this one mission in mind that he will fulfill for his brother. And so it is said that Abbas prepares himself, and he gets that water, and he gets that container for him to go and fill with water. It is said that when Abbas gets on his horse, he rides towards the river. These enemy soldiers come and surround the horse of Abbas. But this was the son of Amir al-Mu'mineen. He had been trained by Ali himself. And so as soon as Abbas would go towards one side, they will disperse. And as soon as he would go towards another side, they will disperse. Until finally Abbas gets to the riverside and he enters into the river. He takes a cup of water into his hands. And it is said that Abbas, he looks at this water and he says, Ya nafsu ba'da al-Husayn huli. Oh, my soul and all my desire, may you be debased after Hussein. How can I allow myself to drink even a drop of water when I see that Hussein is thirsty, when I hear the children are thirsty? And so he spills that water. It is said that Abbas fills that container and he places it with him and he holds it tight. He has his mission and he will take this water back to Hussein. But the enemy soldiers once again surround him. And it is said that he fights a brave fight, but ultimately one of those soldiers, they come and they cut off the hand of Abbas. And then Abbas, he responds, Wallahi in qata'tumu yamini, inni ohami abadan an dini. Even if you cut off my right hand, I will never stop defending my religion. I will never stop defending my Imam Hussein. It is said that they cut off the left hand of Abbas and he has nothing to hold that water canister with anymore, and so he holds it by his teeth. But it is one thing for Abbas to have courage and to have bravery and to have strength despite both of his arms being cut off. And yet it is said that it is only at that moment in which the arrow comes and strikes the water container of Abbas that Abbas loses hope. It is said that the water begins to drip to the ground. And then that enemy soldier comes and hits the head of Abbas and he falls to the ground. His body is bleeding and the arrows are piercing his body. It is said that Imam Hussein is watching this scene from afar. At one time, he sees the flag of his army, it wavers, but then it stands up straight. At another time, he sees that the flag wavers, but then it stands up straight again. But at one moment, the flag, Imam Hussein sees it falls to the ground, and he hears the call, وَأَخَا أَدْرِكْ أَخَا. Oh, my brother, come and see what they have done to your brother. He calls out, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. These are the final moments of Abbas. It is said that Imam Hussein comes by the side of Abbas. And the family of Imam Hussein, the children, they had their hopes. If there was no one else, they had their hopes in Abbas. But then they finally see that Imam Hussein, he is coming back with the body of Abbas and he is crying out, now my back is broken. Now my flag has fallen to the ground. Now I have no more army. And now he is thinking, now I have no more defender to protect the tents, to protect my haram from these enemy soldiers. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ إِنَّا لِلَّهِ وَإِنَّا إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ. ماتم Hussein.
Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. They can cut my arms and my legs. They can take everything that I have. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. They can cut my arms and my legs. They can take everything that I have. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. I will come crawling, oh Hussein. Every day it cuts me inside. I'm so very far from your side. I would give away these eyes just to catch a glimpse of your shrine. If I have to cross the seas and every desert in between, I will come crawling to you, Hussein. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. They can cut my arms and my legs. They can take everything that I have. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. I will come crawling, Hussein. I can tell you that I'm insane in the love of my master Hussein. In this universe there's no pain that can ever keep me away. Every inch that I come your way, every beat of my heart will say, I will come crawling to you, Hussein. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. They can cut my arms and my legs. They can take everything that I have. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. If I lose my family and friends, and my life's coming to an end, if I lose my feet and hands, if I can no longer stand, if I stumble 1,000 times, if the journey's 1,000 miles, I will come crawling to you, Hussein. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. They can cut my arms and my legs. They can take everything that I have. I will come crawling, Hussein. I will come crawling to you, Hussein, on the plains of Karbala, when you said with a heart so scarred, Hal min Nasr yansurna, who can help me in time so hard, falling from the cot to the floor, Ali Asghar gave this call, I will come crawling to you, Hussein. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. They can cut my arms and my legs. They can take everything that I have. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. The Tijani brothers know you've been our guide as we've grown. You have led us down the road where your blessings are bestowed. How can we not then proclaim every moment, every day? I will come crawling to you, Hussein. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. They can cut my arms and my legs. They can take everything that I have. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. I will come crawling to you, Hussein. Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein, Ya Hussein. Muhammad wa Muhammad salawat. Muhammad. If I can please ask the brothers to proceed to the Urdu hall, the sisters will start coming in here.
किया गया। ये दोनों अलम, ये मंजर जहनों में याद रहे। एक अलम हुसैन के खैमे के बाहर जमीन पर गड़ा है, जिसके फरेरे के नीचे इमाम हुसैन का सवार घोड़ा और उस पर इमाम हुसैन है। एक बड़ा